my name is Michelle Alexander, and I'm a registered nurse, and I live in a very rural community in Montana. Um, I've been a nurse for 26 years. I'm the mother of two teenage boys, ages 15 and 18. Actually, last night my oldest son just graduated from high school. Very proud mother. My children are wonderful. I've lived here in Kalispell for 17 years. I was born in Montana. I've moved around a lot growing up and lived in Portland, Oregon for about 10 years. And after we had our first child, we decided to move back to Montana to raise our children. So that's a little bit about my history.
So now I've heard a little bit about the story that you make presentations about, which is the relationship you had with a lady called Michelle, also called Michelle. This is Michelle Woodring. And I would very, very much like to hear some more from you, and especially really how it affected you, how you found the love in your heart to be able to support Michelle in the ways that she was asking, and what you saw as being her experiences as well.
Okay, well, it was about 6 years ago. I was assigned a patient, and her name was Michelle. And my supervisor came up to me that morning and said, "You're going to be getting an interesting patient." And I knew when my supervisor came up to me, I thought there's something more here that she's not telling me, because I've done home health nursing and hospice nursing for so long that nothing really was new to me. And she said, your patient's name is Michelle, and there's a couple of things that you probably need to know before you go see her. And she said the first one is that she's blind, completely blind. And I said, wow, that will be a first. I've never worked with a completely blind patient before. And I said, that will be interesting. And she said, there's one other thing that you need to know about her. Michelle is transgender. And I said, okay, that's all right. And I didn't, at that particular time, I really had no idea what my supervisor was even talking about. And I didn't want to let her know that I did not know what that term meant. So I just proceeded on and gathered my information, and I looked at Michelle's last history and physical from a year prior when she was in the hospital, and the emergency room physician referenced her as a transvestite. And I said, oh, I thought to myself, oh, okay, I know what that is. My only reference point was my mother had taken me to a drag show in Portland, Oregon, some 20 years prior. I think I was 21 years old. And the reason that my mom took me there was to basically expand my horizons a little bit, considering that I was from a very rural place in Butte, Montana. And she wanted to show me that there was more diversity out in the world. So that was my reference point. And so I envisioned my patient, Michelle, having a lot of makeup on, these big evening gowns. So I thought, well, all right, this is gonna be interesting. So I called her, and she answered the phone, and I told her I was going to be over and admitting her to home health. She had a respiratory infection, and when she answered the phone, she was obviously kind of a high squeaky voice, and I thought to myself, well, the voice thing isn't working, sweetie. So I was judging her, and so when I went to her home, that was not the case at all. She was very ill, and for the first 3 weeks or so, it was like I felt like I was walking on eggshells. I wanted to ask her questions, but I did not want to make her feel uncomfortable, so I didn't. But the one thing that really bothered me about myself at that time is that I really was internally judging her, thinking, this is a lifestyle choice. And it really bothered me about myself because I really felt that I had mastered being non-judgmental, being a nurse for so long and coming across so many different people in my life. Um, so after about 3 weeks, she actually broke the ice and told me if I had if I had the courage to ask, she had the courage to answer. And so that just opened up a whole new. She was basically my teacher, and I was her student. And I started asking her a lot of questions about her life, and she started giving me books to read and videos to watch. And with each new video and each new book that I read, I would go back to her apartment and ask her more questions about being transgender and about being blind, and how, how it was for her growing up. Well, then one day she gave me her journal to read. And this journal she typed on a regular typewriter back in the 80s. And she gave that to me, and it was, I read it from the beginning to the end in one evening. And it was her journal over about a 2.5 year period of time where she was actually transitioning from Michael to Michelle. And that was here in Kalispell, Montana. And at that time, there was probably maybe 7,000 people here. And when I read that, that's what opened my heart to her. And I understood. I understood that I was the one that was being blind, and that being transgender had nothing to do with the look. It had nothing to do with a lifestyle choice. Her journal was filled with such emotional pain and such rejection that at that time I just knew she just needed a friend, and she needed somebody to reach out to her. So shortly after that, I actually went to a Catholic Crescile, and I'm not Catholic, and my dad asked me to go with my stepmother, and because she wouldn't go unless I did, and it was like a 4 day retreat. And I said, sure, I'll go. I'm sure that there's something that I can take from that will benefit me. So I went, and the whole theme of the event was love one another. And the entire time that I was there, I kept thinking about my friend Michelle, thinking, would these people that are talking about loving one another, would they accept and love Michelle just for who she is, the person that she is internally? And when I came home from that experience, the following day, I don't know if you call it an epiphany or what, but I knew at that moment, I had this aha moment that, wow, she was going to die. And I had nothing to really base that on physically. She was pretty compromised, but I really felt that she was doing okay, and that she would eventually be discharged from home health, and get over her respiratory infection. But after that moment, I knew that Michelle was going to die. And I also knew why I was put in her life. I knew that I had to help her through the emotional journey of the dying process. And I also knew that my role was to make sure that she knew that she was 100% unconditionally loved and accepted before she died. And so when I had that moment, at first I thought, wow, okay, here we go. From my hospice background, I knew that when I would make a very deep soul-to-soul connection with another human being that was on their way out of this world, that it's extremely, can be very draining on me, and because I will give 100%. So I knew at that point, it felt like that I was asked by God to do this. And so I said, okay, I will do it. So after that, I really started crossing boundaries, professional boundaries, which I rarely did, as a nurse. But I gave Michelle my email. She had my cell phone number. I started visiting her on my off time. I introduced my children to her. And that was, my children at that time were ages 9 and 12. And I thought, wow, what do I tell them? Because Michelle was very tall. She was 6 feet 2 inches tall, or maybe even taller than that. And she was, she had male features. So at that time, we decided to tell our oldest son the truth, and about her. And my youngest son, I just told him that she was blind and that she was a very tall woman. So we went over and introduced my children to her, and it was amazing because when we came home that night, I asked my oldest son, I said, do you have any questions, that I can answer for you? And he said to me, Mom, she's really nice. And he said, it doesn't matter what's on the outside, it matters what's on the inside. That's what counts. And so it was another one of those aha moments that, wow, here my 12-year-old son gets the meaning of unconditional love and acceptance. So after that, my youngest son and Michelle developed a very, very close relationship. She taught him how to read Braille. They played chess together. But during this whole time, just watching her and listening to her story and what a tough life she's had and how much rejection that she faced and how cruel people can be, it just really opened up my heart to the power of love, and not only giving of oneself, but accepting that love too. Michelle really opened my heart as far as, she demonstrated to me what it really meant to open up your heart and your soul to another human being. She showed me her vulnerability. We had some very, very emotional talks about where she was at in her life, and we frequently would question why it was that our paths met. And she knew. She said, you've been put in my life to help me out of this life. And so she knew what was going on. And I asked her, well, why have you been put into my life? And she said, oh, that's easy. That's so that I can educate you on the true internal landscape of what transgender means, and you're going to turn around and educate other people. And I said, well, I know that. I knew that, but I said, there's more to it. There's more to it. And so I questioned that question, and I found my answers after she passed away. And it was basically to learn about my own authenticity, and to also learn unconditional love and acceptance of not only just others, but of myself as well, and to teach other people the same thing. So after, it was just such a divinely guided experience. It was really quite amazing. A week in August, so it's about almost 4.5 months, there was a day in August that I had previously, several months ago, taken the whole entire week off, and I had already made arrangements with my mother-in-law. She was going to take my boys for a couple of days, and this was arranged way before I met Michelle. And before that week, Michelle had 2 caregivers, and they both wanted Thursday and Friday off, and asked me if I could go and help her, take care of her for a few hours. And I said, sure, I would love to do that. I'm off work, So I drove about 2 hours and dropped my kids off so my mother-in-law could pick them up. And on my way back, I again had that same feeling that I had after I got back from the Catholic Crucial. I was overcome with emotion and started crying, and thought, wow, something's going to happen this week. And I had really no basis to to feel that way, because again, physically Michelle was doing very well. I mean, not well, but she was stable, and there was nothing really going on to indicate that she was declining. But so I went home, and at that time I told my spouse, I said, I have a bad feeling about this week. Something's going to happen. And he said, well, maybe you're reading too much into it. I thought, you know what, you're right. I am. So I just kind of let it go. But I thought to myself, wow, if something really does happen this week, this whole event was just divinely orchestrated. So as the week went on, I was visiting with Michelle on a Tuesday, and she said the same thing to me. She said, I have a bad feeling about this weekend. And I said, do you think you're getting worse? And she said, sometimes yes, and sometimes no. What do you think? And I said, sometimes I do, and same thing. But I said, I think you're doing okay. So Thursday rolls around, and I brought her over to my home, and she kept falling asleep. And that's not like her. She was not a napper, but she kept falling asleep, and she almost acted like she was over-medicated. So when she was over at my house that day, I decided to count her medications, and to see just, was she taking too many? And I was really looking forward to taking care of her on Thursday and Friday so that I could see what she was doing with her medications. And when I counted all of her medications, it was clear that it was not, she was not taking too many medications, and that whole entire day Thursday, she didn't take anything, and she had medications for pain, and she had medications that would help her with her shortness of breath, but she didn't take anything, and she was not in pain, and she was not having any shortness of breath, but she was just drowsy and kind of had a little bit of a slurred speech. So I brought her home that Thursday night, and I got her all tucked in, and I called her on my way back home, and she didn't answer the phone. And I called her again, and by that time she did answer, and she had a fall. And she was okay. She got back in her recliner, and I said, well, I'll be there in the morning. So on Friday morning, I went there, and it was the same thing. I couldn't put my finger on it. Her vital signs were fine. Everything checked out fine, but she just was not acting her normal self. She just kept falling asleep, and she got up and went over to her computer, and she was amazing being blind. Her ability to work her computer was incredible, and she was responding to an email, and she kept saying, I don't know what's going on here, because she was and I went and looked at what she was doing. She was trying to type the message in the subject area of the email. So I told her what she was doing, what she needed to do. We needed to move her cursor down, and she basically just said, oh, I'll worry about it later. Well, that wasn't like her either, because that would have drove her nuts. Why can't I figure this computer out? So she went back into her recliner. Well, by that afternoon, I got really worried, and I thought, something's not right here. And I started crying, and she said, what's wrong? And I said, I don't know, something's not right. And so her caregiver by that time was back, and I called her caregiver, and her caregiver said, why are you crying to me? And I said, I don't know, I just have a feeling it's the beginning of the end. And can you come check on her tonight and make sure that she's okay and possibly spend the night? And her caregiver said, well, I can't spend the night, but I will make sure that she's okay and make sure that she has something to eat. So I went home, and I again started crying, and I just said, this something's not right here. Something's not right. So my spouse at the time said, well, why are you questioning your intuition? And I said, you know what, you're right. I need to go back there, and I need to spend the night. So I went back and spent the evening with her, and we always had we had this promise to one another that I would always be very open and honest with her as to how I felt that she was doing physically. So at that time, I told her, I said, I don't know what's going on, but I have a feeling it's the beginning of the end. And it was very emotional, and basically we said our goodbyes, and I helped her with a bath, and I helped her get cleaned up, and um, she had just had a hospital bed delivered that day, and I asked her where she wanted to sleep, and she said, well, I'll try the bed. So I got her all tucked in, and she had her dog next to her, and the cat next to her, and I said, I'll be here right on the floor. So I grabbed a pillow and a blanket and lay down on the floor, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, I thought, well, I'm going to turn the light on and see how she's doing. And I did, and she was semi-responsive. She was actively dying, and she had been incontinent. So at that time, my nursing instincts just clicked in, and I told her, I said, okay, sweetie, it's just little old me and big old you. I've got to get you cleaned up, and so I gave her a bed bath and talked to her and got her cleaned up, and then I just spent the last couple of hours talking to her and telling her to let go, that it was her time, that it was going to be okay, that she was loved, and basically she died in my arms. She died at 7 o'clock the next morning with me holding her. So, and she died peacefully, she died comfortably, and she died knowing that she was loved unconditionally. And the amazing process was that she came to an unconditional love of herself and of her what she always perceived as her duality, and which I never really perceived it in that manner, because I think we all have two sides to us. We all have our dark side and our light side, or the ego and the our higher self. But I really feel that Michelle, when she came to the unconditional love and acceptance of herself, she was finally able to go. She was able to let go and die. And so it was just such a profound experience for me. After she died, it was actually, that was the beginning of my spiritual journey, because again, I was so amazed by how it happened, and just having a knowing, after I went to that Catholic why I was in her life, and just watching things unfold, and kind of having that knowing even before it was going to happen. It was pretty profound. So after she died, I again had another little moment of it was kind of one of those moments of, oh, you want me to do what now? You want me to write a book? You've got to be kidding. Number one, I don't like to write, and number two is I'm a very poor writer, and I'm not saying that to criticize myself, but it's the truth, and I'm okay with that. Writing's never been a strength of mine, but I thought, okay, if that's what's meant to happen, then it will happen, and the right people will show up in my life to help me tell this story. But I knew that I needed to tell her story as a way to open up hearts and minds, not only for the transgender community, but that mainly was, I felt like I was an ally, and Michelle was a true example of how being a transgender it comes from within. She was blind from the time she was 18 months old. She never had a visual construct of the physical differences between what a male looked like versus a female. She could never look at me and say, that's how I want to dress, that's how I want to act. It came from within, and her story is proof of that. So I knew that was, again, my role now is to open people's hearts and minds to this community. They are just human beings, no different than myself, and they go through so much heartache and so much ridicule and so much rejection that it just saddens my heart. Um, so my experience with Michelle is how I started learning about my own authenticity, um, and what truly mattered. And it's so basic. Michelle might have been a very complex human being. Other people might have looked at her as complex, but really she was very, very simple. She's no different than myself and anybody else. All she was looking for was to be accepted and to be loved. That's all. And through my experiences, after writing this book, and I'm going to back up a little bit. When I wrote the book, The Color of Sunlight, it took me about a year and a half to write down, well, about 2 years. It took me about 2 years, and I had to do everything by longhand, and then I would go back and type it in the computer and then redo it and redo it and redo it. Well, again, I had faith that I knew that this is what that this is what I was supposed to be doing, and that the right people would show up. Well, it just so happened that my co-writer, her name is Michelle also, she was just kind of plopped into my lap. And it was amazing how the whole thing unfolded. I was on a computer, and I was on a forum, and I was reading about her story and just said, geez, there's a lot of similarities between your story and my patient, Michelle. And she wrote back to me and said, what is a trans woman doing in Montana, thinking, referring to me. And I said, no, go back and read a little bit about my journey with my patient. So she did, and she wrote back to me and said, oh my gosh, this is your destiny. You must write this story and, write about Michelle's life. And I wrote back to her and I said, oh, I already did. I'm already done with what I can do with my part of the story. I'm just looking for the right person to show up to help me finish it. And she wrote back to me and she said, perhaps am I the writer that you're looking for? And I said, yep, you're it. So she is the one that took my 180 pages, and I gave her the foundation, and she's the one who put the walls up and hung the pictures and took my story and made it into the book that it is. So that's a little bit about my journey. And again, it's Michelle, my patient, is the one who opened up my heart to the power of unconditional love, loving someone from who they are inside on a soul-to-soul basis. No expectations, no prerequisites, just loving from our higher self. And it's such a beautiful experience when we can both give that love and also to receive somebody else's unconditional love. It can be very powerful. So that's a little bit about my journey and what I learned from my blind transgender patient. I also during that time of writing about my experience with her, that is when I again started my own spiritual journey and started my own look into being authentic and what that means and the masks that we wear in order to be accepted. So I thought to myself, wow, that's why she was really, really put into my life. It was not only to just to educate other people regarding, the true internal landscape of being transgender. It was part of my own soul's evolvement, and it was because of what she showed me and taking, her showing me her vulnerability and her true person that she was, helped me to evolve as well. And that is the lesson that I needed to learn from my patient Michelle.
Gosh, that's a really wonderful story. So you brought each other to unconditional love, really, and now you're bringing other people to unconditional love too.
Yes, yes. And the people that I've met along this journey have been amazing. Um, I have met so many transgender people, um, and I tell you what, they are the most authentic people I've ever met in my life, because they have had to strip themselves, internally and externally, just to be who they are inside. Um, like so, I said I learned so many lessons from that community on what it true authenticity really means. They're the most loving, giving, um, people I've ever met in my life, and true. They're so true. Um, so I still learn from that community every day. So I still feel that that's part of my, um, purpose here in this world, is to again open people's hearts and minds to, uh, the transgender community, that they are just people too, and they're no different. You know, being transgender is no different from, they're human beings that need love and compassion, and, um, just the power of love. We all need it. That's the basic survival need.
And what are you doing now to help people to understand this? Are you going out giving talks, presentations? What are you doing?
Well, it's kind of twofold. I have given several talks to, um, different organizations, and that has opened up some doors. The one organization that asked me to come speak was, Unitarian Universalist Church in Billings, where you were at. They asked me to come and tell my story, and that was a wonderful experience, because again I thought, geez, if I can open just one heart and one mind, then I've done my job. So I've been doing a lot of speaking that way. And the other thing that I've done in the last couple of years, after Michelle died, is I got my certification as a life coach. And I think another part of my purpose, and it's still, everything's kind of evolving and unfolding as it's meant to be, but is to coach other people, including the transgender community, on, stepping into your greatness and learning again how that starts with unconditionally loving ourselves, all of ourselves, without judgment. And, so that's what I'm doing as well. So I'm not really sure where things are going to go from here, but I'm just letting things unfold the way that they're supposed to, and I try to keep growing and changing and evolving, um, my own self, so that I can help others to do the same.
Beautiful. And I can imagine that when you're talking to people, you'll find that quite a lot of people are really profoundly affected by your story.
Yes, yes. I think it does have a lot of power into to just open some hearts and minds on the power of unconditional love, and reaching out and giving to another, and then also receiving that other person's love as well. And it's such a beautiful feeling when you can connect to another human being on a true soul to soul level,